Well, well, Steven Crowder has finally come out of hiding after his depressing divorce. And I say depressing because we got video of one of the last arguments he and his ex-wife had, and it just left me feeling awful to watch. He was clearly abusing her. I mean, we see it happen in the video. He's screaming at her, berating her, just throwing insults at her as she, sits there and tries to calm him down, de-escalate the situation. At each point where she tries to de-escalate, he escalates. If you haven't seen that video, you really should check it out. I'd show it now, but we're kind of getting into something here, so I recommend you go check that out on your own time. With that said, though, Steven Crowder has returned, and he's now brought back Change My Mind, or as I like to call it, Cringe My Mind. His very popular ongoing series that's all about debating random people, usually just off the street, maybe off of college campuses more often than not. As you can imagine, or might know, Charlie Kirk did a very similar thing, or maybe even stole the idea. I don't know who did it first, actually. All that aside, though, Steven Crowder's not done this for quite some time, and because of that, the return of Change My Mind is a big deal for conservatives. This was a classic household name brand series for conservatives that they love. The format, in fact, itself is very popular. So I figured, considering that Charlie Kirk, that Steven Crowder has brought this back, we might as well take a look and watch the video. It's got 3 million views in 5 days, so clearly there's a ridiculous amount of hype behind this. And yeah, I figured we'd give it a watch. By the way, if you like my stuff, consider leaving a like and a comment down below. It really does help a lot. YouTube has basically announced, well, all but announced, that they're suppressing progressive content and boosting conservative content, so your help is more valuable now than ever. I really do appreciate it. Now, let's get right into it, without any further ado. The left is violent, cringe my mind. Now, just before we get into it, I want to let you know, rest assured, the left is not any more violent than the right. In fact, the right is statistically, provably, factually far more violent than the left. And the areas where the left does excel in areas of violence are almost always against property. The left, when it does its violent crime, destroys property, causes, millions of dollars of damage at worst. In the case of right-wing extremism and right-wing political violence, it's way more deaths caused by their side than the left. And that is provable in the data. I have a feeling, though, that either A, most people that are going to debate him won't know the data, or B, if they do and they bring it up, Steven Crowder's probably going to try to pivot and goalpost move to arguments about specific anecdotal examples, such as Charlie Kirk getting shot. This is all very clearly just part of Steven Crowder grifting off of Charlie Kirk getting shot. Obviously, I don't care that much about that on a moral level. I don't morally object to that too much, because fuck Charlie Kirk and all that. But at the same time, it's really hypocritical for these conservatives who are actively trying to drum up pity for Charlie Kirk and argue he was this martyr that we should respect and mourn. It's kind of hypocritical the way they're just grifting off of and trying to monetize the hell out of his death. Pretty degenerate, pretty despicable. At least from their POV. It's hypocritical. With that said, let's get right into it.
The reason we're here, and I don't think you would argue that this is unnecessary, the assassination in cold blood is an act of terrorism of Charlie Kirk. Is that political violence? You seem so confident on the Hortmans, but not Charlie Kirk.
I was just thinking about your...
God damn. Okay, so we're really going to be filtering for the least capable of defending their ideas in this one. Or maybe this person just was who they got. I don't know. Really? You can't just say, yeah, Charlie Kirk getting killed was political violence? It clearly was. It's an easy bullet to bite if you could even consider it such, I feel. Bullet to bite. Pun intended. But why are you arguing with him about some anecdote? You can bring up the data and point out that the right commits far more political violence than the left, objectively. All right, let's see.
If that doesn't constitute political violence that could be answered in the affirmative immediately, of course, what would?
Hey YouTube, what you're about to watch is a new segment we call Change My Mind.
Oh boy.
Welcome back to Change My Mind. It's been a while. This is the place where we rationalize, we reason our positions on controversial
That's the meme.
topics. When I created Change My Mind in 2017, I had one goal in mind, and that was to shine a light on the institutions that had failed Americans. Often students propagandized by the educational system, as well as legacy media.
Mr. Trump's once again defending comments he made about the white supremacists and neo-Nazis.
I like how one of those signs he was holding was, hate speech isn't real.
Find people on both sides.
The president's statement that both sides are responsible for the violence in Charlottesville.
It was designed to bring genuine dialogue to what had become an impenetrable echo chamber dominated by progressive professors, administrators, student leadership, along with the complicit media and big tech establishment. To put it simply, the kind of dialogue that evaded all of cable news.
I know you said that. 150, please don't get hurt.
You said I was being hyperbolic. Let me respond. I'm not. You being a white man as an insult?
That just shows you the ridiculousness of all of this.
Wait, is he arguing there's no conversation in mainstream news, and yet that conversation is happening on mainstream news in the clips you're showing? Where is conversation being stifled? Also, isn't it kind of crazy that the woke, overrun universities that don't allow anyone with alternate ideas to speak are the #1 place where he's given a platform to speak? Does that make any sense to you guys? It doesn't make any sense to me. That logic does not mesh well.
So, nearly a decade later, with billions of plays, countless discussions, inspired student iterations, one meme of the year, and yes, even a few changed minds later,
You somewhat changed your mind.
Change My Mind had grown
And
far
the
bigger
stream,
than I ever initially anticipated.
My internet's like shitting its pants right now. I don't know why. Sorry if the stream gets choppy. I see we've lost like 11,000 frames and dropping. So bear with me. Hopefully my internet stabilizes.
And with that came pushback, controversy, increasing hostility, and yes, straight up violence.
You piece of living garbage-ass dumpster fire.
It got to the point where security became a serious issue.
What's crazy is literally just a couple days ago, a Democrat senator and judge, judge, their house was burned down. Maybe it was an electrical fire, though in the span of like 20 minutes, the house burned down to practically nothing. And it was a very sudden whoosh with no known cause at the moment. It's being investigated for arson. And a lot of people seem to suspect it's arson, considering that very same, I think it was, I forget their last name, their first and last name, but they were a couple. One senator, one judge. Both Democrats. The judge had blocked Trump's move in regards to immigration recently. And now we're dealing with a string of targeted attacks on Democrat politicians that the Republicans are just burying. Like, their news media doesn't even touch on the story. No one on the right even knows that this happened. Meanwhile, they're still making a martyr out of this one guy. And all the while, we've got the backdrop of the reality that is the undeniable massive disparity between the left and right in political violence, which is, you know, if you look at the right's propensity for it, they do it way more, several times more than the left. The left, on the other hand, commits a lot more property damage. If you want to argue the left is violent towards property, well, I mean, I won't argue with you, because the fact is the data seems to agree. The left is more violent towards property, the right is violent towards people. I don't even think most leftists would disagree.
And so I pulled back. Now, given recent events, however, I felt led, compelled even, to bring it back. Voices like ours, and I mean ours, can't be silenced. And I say this to you watching on the left. Made me do this. I didn't necessarily want to, and everyone told me that this, in today's climate, could not be done unless I took unbelievable precautions, unless it was absolutely kept a secret until mere hours before the event as a pop-up, unless I literally brought an army with me and bulletproofed the entire radius. Which is exactly what we did. And so today, for the first time in many years,
I'm gonna be honest, this shit is so fucking LARPy. I've been seeing that a bunch of streamers are not going to TwitchCon because they're afraid they're going to put their fans in danger, is what they're saying. Like, supposedly Hassan's not going to TwitchCon because he's afraid that someone will try to assassinate him or attack him, and he'll put his fans in danger. I've seen, like, even non-political creators, like, I think it was Pokimane, maybe, or maybe it was, what's her name? Valkyrie? I think it might have been Valkyrie. What happened to the stream? My internet's really acting odd today. Losing a lot of frames in the live stream, but it's nothing to do with my end, I can tell. Anyway, though, it's really odd how much people have taken advantage of this one story to try and claim that there's this massive rise in political violence lately on both sides, quote-unquote. Like, things have just gotten so crazy because the left and right are just fighting each other all over the place that people don't want to go to TwitchCon. It feels like such a mass hysteria. The right is doing a really good job of instilling a mass hysteria in their followers over this.
Change My Mind returns, and back to one of the places where it all began, Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. Today's subject is plain and simple. The left is violent. Will anybody be able to change my mind?
Thank you, Christina, for sitting down. Stephen.
Yes, okay.
So I'll take that. I mean, you're not maybe super familiar with what we do with these this series. Let me just kind of clarify what it is. First, I'll tell you what it's not. It's not gotcha.
All right,
it's not
here we go.
This is not meant to be, or
It is both of those things.
it won't be used to clip into some kind of a dunk or something, just foment people espousing the same rhetoric on one side. It will be uploaded contextually in its entirety, where hopefully we have a productive discussion.
Yes.
We rationalize our positions, reason them on controversial topics.
That is fair. I don't think Steven Crowder uploads the out-of-context clips himself. That's for all the, like, dumb fucks on shorts to do.
Before I get to the premise of today, could you do me a favor just so we can find some common ground?
Yeah.
This is what's being cited right now quite a bit. Just the definition of political violence. I want to make sure we both agree on it.
Political violence are criminal complaints, indictments, and court records looking for crimes that seek a socio-political change or to communicate to outside audience.
And I'll summarize it. That's the technical description from the source cited.
Yeah.
It's violence as a tool being used toward a political end. In other words, just because you vote Democrat.
I'm curious. If we read that Economist article, is it going to argue that the left is committing more political violence? I'm sorry, guys. I have to know. Continue with a free trial. Are you serious? Oh, that's really clever. That's really clever. He's gone and cited a source that to read past what he shows you, you have to get through a paywall. That's really, really clever. That's really clever. You couldn't fact check him if you wanted to. So we can't find out what the rest of the article actually says. Because for all we know, the article goes on to back up our claim that, well, okay, if you look at the data, though, the left is far less, is far less violent than the right. But that's very clever. That's a good way to cover your ass as a grifter.
The technical description from the source cited, it's violence as a tool being used toward a political end. In other words, just because you vote Democrat or because you vote Republican, if you accidentally hit someone with your car and commit manslaughter, that's not political violence. If you vote Democrat, but let's say you go out and run someone over because of their politics, that would be political violence. Do we agree on that?
I think I can agree with you on that.
Okay,
yes.
good. So the premise today is that particularly today in 2025, by and large, the political violence is coming from the left. It's not proportionate with that on the right.
Nope.
That's the reason for the security that you see today that's very necessary. And it's
I like the rolling out all the security as a big virtue signal of how, like, dangerous it is. And he's like, see, how could I not be right? How could I be wrong when I hired all this security to make it look like I'm in such big danger by being here? These people are making a whole thing about being huge pussies. I really need to make sure we don't forget that. They're pussies who are hiring groups of big dudes to protect them as if they're under as much threat as the President of the United States. The level of self-importance these people are demonstrating, to think they were anywhere on Charlie Kirk's level. Charlie Kirk might have been the most prominent conservative activist out there. Sure, you can read it. Just do a Vosh. Oh, is this a archive link? Is this what Vosh uses? Why ain't it loading? I'll give it 3 more seconds. If it doesn't load, then I give up. 3, 2, 1. Oh, it loaded. Nice. Last second. It loaded at the very last second. Hey, we can see it. Okay, let's see. The very article that Steven Crowder shows to this lady and argues must be on his side. Let's see what it has to say on the matter. Is radical left violence really on the rise in America? The killing of Charlie Kirk is part of a grim pattern of political violence. This is what the data shows. On September 10th, Charlie Kirk, a right-wing activist, was shot dead while speaking at a university in Utah. Although a suspect is in custody, the motive of the killer is still unknown. President Donald Trump, who has himself been the target of gunmen, pinned the blame on rhetoric from the radical left. Assessing political violence in America is inherently subjective. Analysts must determine which forms of violence count as political and assign ideological labels to attackers or victims. But the studies and datasets available, largely compiled by researchers whom skeptical conservatives would probably dismiss as biased, suggest that the killing of Mr. Kirk is not representative of broader trends. Well, well, well. Right where it cuts off, huh? Might is right. United States criminal cases involving political violence by ideology. Left is dark black. Gray is other. Darkish gray is Islamist. And then dark red is right-wing extremism. And as you can see, we're obviously still we don't have a lot of data gathered for this year. Apparently political violence has been on... Well, it actually makes sense that political violence was on a drop since Trump left office. You can see that political violence, even from the right, was on a downward trend ever since Trump left office. Because what really caused it to spike was, oh, what happened here? What happened here? Biden comes into office and immediately it spikes down, and now we're in 2025, and we can probably expect things to start going right back up. Yeah, and you can see, look at all those big, bright red bars. The amount of political violence the right commits compared to the left is, it's magnitudes. This is like a very popular concept that the Nazis pushed, which was the idea of getting people to believe one big lie, right? Like one that is just, the more lies you can get them to believe, the better, but at the end of the day, your goal is to get them to believe progressively bigger and bigger lies. More, you know, flawed lies, more fallible lies. And a great example of this is the way that Steven Crowder had the audacity to show us the article that disproves what he's saying, but showed us a clipped out select piece just to make it look like it was backing him up. Here's the thing though. That poor person that he's debating right now has no idea the very source that he brought up debunks his claim. And conveniently, that site's behind a paywall, so if you don't know a way to get past it, then how would you know?
The problem that's reaching a boiling point that may not be sustainable. If you disagree with me, you're welcome to change my mind.
I don't know if I can change your mind, because here's the thing. When I see the sign that says the left is violent, and you talk about how it's not proportional, and I would love to see your statistics about that.
It's hilarious, because it's really not proportional. The right commits magnitudes more political violence than the left.
Because we could make the same statement about the right very easily, right? Like we could say that, was it just a month or two ago that the Democratic lawmakers were shot, and that was like, all right. I think our bigger problem is that the media...
Stop arguing with them on anecdotes. Like, if you're a progressive watching right now, I don't think you realize these people live to bring your level of engagement with issues away from data and to anecdotes. If they can just throw anecdotes at you, and that's the standard for whether or not they've won the argument, they will win. If you make the grounds for proving a point, being able to back up a statistical trend with data, they will not be up to par for the task. You will be, if you're on the right side of things, if you're on the left, and you are on the left side of this issue. However, this person clearly doesn't know. They clearly don't know what the actual data is. They don't know that you really don't want to engage with these people on the grounds of anecdotes because they'll always win there. They are really good at finding and popularizing the most absurd and memorable anecdotal stories that back up their worldview. Don't argue with them on individual stories. Argue with them about data and actual trends that are backed up by literally any real evidence.
In Minnesota, right?
Right, yeah, because she was a senator and her husband was also killed, and that was done by the right, whatever. But
it wasn't. But continue.
Oh, that wasn't a.
No.
It wasn't a conservative. Or,
who? What got brought up there?
And her husband was also killed, and that was done by the.
Wait, veteran. Who?
We could make the same statement about the right very easily, right? Like we could say that was it just a month or two ago that the Democratic lawmakers were shot, and that was like, all right. I think our bigger problem is that the
Talk about the Hortmans in Minnesota, right?
Right, yeah, because she was a senator and her husband was also killed, and that was done by the right, whatever. But
it wasn't. But continue.
Well, okay, let's be clear. It isn't necessarily wrong, but like. Oh wait, no, that's I think she might be mixing up two different stories, because I'm pretty sure the Hortmans are not the same family that got their house burned down recently. The Hortmans might have actually been attacked by a verified, like, far-right supremacist. Hold on, let me check this. Hortmans attacked attacker. He's just outright lying here. On June 14, 2025, Minnesota State Representative Melissa Hortman was assassinated in a shooting at her home in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, United States. Hortman, the leader of the State House Democratic Caucus, was killed alongside her husband, Mark. Earlier that morning, State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, Yvette, were shot and seriously injured in their home in nearby Champlin and hospitalized. Police responding to the attack on the Hoffmans checked on the Hortmans' home, where a man fired at them. The shooter escaped, sparking the most extensive manhunt in Minnesota history. The authorities identified 57-year-old Vance Luther Bolter as a suspect and captured him on the evening of June 15th in Green Isle, Minnesota. He was federally charged with murder, stalking, and firearms offenses. The state charged Bolter with 2 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted second-degree murder. Hennepin County Attorney Mark Moriarty announced her intention to upgrade the charges to first-degree murder before a grand jury. The 2 victims were members of the Democratic Party, affiliated DFL. The federal charging documents describe Bolter as acting with the intent to kill, injure, harass, and intimidate Minnesota legislators, quote-unquote. Governor Tim Walz called the shooting an act of targeted political violence. Inside Bolter's vehicle was a list of nearly 70 people, including abortion rights advocates, Democratic politicians, and abortion providers. Okay, so, like, he's just outright lying. Isn't it clever how he lied about that? Because, no, that was in fact a very violent, dedicated conservative who was out there to kill abortion activists and Democrat politicians and had a murder list in his trunk. And his way of denying that is just something really clever here is he doesn't let that point that he knows he's wrong on be the argument. He doesn't say, that wasn't the right. Notice how he says it.
Talk about the Hortmans in Minnesota, right?
Right, yeah, because she was a senator and her husband was also killed, and that was done by the right, whatever. But
it wasn't. But continue.
Oh, that wasn't.
See, like, it wasn't, but continue. He's like, he doesn't want it to be a thing that they linger on. He even tells her to continue, because if they don't, and they actually argue on that, if this person knows their stuff, that will not stand. He knows he's lying. They all know they're lying. They always all know they're lying, just as much as he does here.
No.
It wasn't a conservative or...
No, that's why I used the example that I did. The person, Vance Bolter, who committed it, specifically said it had nothing to do with politics, and he left a letter reasoning it, saying that Tim Walz had ordered him to carry a hit out on people.
He also had a list of abortion activists and Democrats in his car, on a list in his car. The literal murderer saying, "Oh, I didn't do it for political means," does not absolve that of being the reason. The list of victims says otherwise.
So he was very clear that it wasn't in the name of politics.
Sorry,
That's
list
someone
of targets.
who happened to be, on some issues...
Like, okay, let's listen to the the literal murderer. Let's listen to the murderer and believe him about what his motive was. He totally wouldn't lie to protect his side. Let's believe Ghislaine Maxwell on her claims about Epstein all of a sudden. I guess that's who we're believing on those grounds, that when she says there's no Epstein files, then there must be no Epstein files. Like, how is the right gotten away with being this clearly biased? They will defend murderers and pedophiles openly just to get a W in a debate. It's wild.
Republican, on some issues Democrat. He was appointed by a Tim Walz administration. So that was not done in the name of political violence. He said Tim Walz ordered him to assassinate somebody who was out of his mind. But I'd like you to continue with the example.
Sure.
He said that Tim Walz ordered him to assassinate someone. He was out of his mind. Or who was out of his mind. I don't know exactly what he's trying to say there. I guess he's trying to argue that the guy with a list of Democrats and abortion activists he planned on murdering, he's trying to argue that guy was just insane and politically unaffiliated. I mean, we don't even have to argue about individual anecdotes. We could argue about the data, the very same data that he brought up that doesn't agree with him, but he tried to frame as if it did. You know who also did something similar to that once? If you guys have watched me for a long time, you might remember Blair White did something like that, where she showed the first lines of an article and cut, like, the first paragraph in half to make it look like the article agreed with her, because it was from, like, a reputable Canadian Cancer Society thing. And then we went to the page just because I was really curious to see what the rest of it said, because there was just a wording to the last bit before it cut off that made me feel like it might be about to go, but, and completely flip in terms of what it's saying. Sure enough, I go to the page, and it did. It immediately goes, however. The next word was however. And that at that point I knew that Blair White had clipped that shit out of context and lied. And Crowder did exactly the same thing here. They want to be able to say they have stats, that they have sources and data, and look at this reputable article that agrees with me, but they really can't. Not without really blatantly twisting it. If you're willing to do the bare minimum of effort to just go, let's look into that article, let's find that article and see what it really says. More often than not, you can just... dude, imagine if I was talking to Steven Crowder right now, and I just brought up that article on my phone and scrolled down and said, hold on, that Economist article you just showed me, it says the right has consistently for the last 2 decades and more committed several times more political violence than the left. Here, see, it's the same article. Like you could just do that. How... he would just have to edit you out. I don't even know what he would do in a situation like that. But always assume when these people make a claim like that they're lying. Start looking for the lie. You will find it way easier than you expect. It's way easier to find the truth in their lies and to prove that it's a lie than you would expect, more often than not.
Sure, and let's say, okay, so he wasn't right. That's fine.
No, it wasn't political violence.
It wasn't political. Oh, it didn't count as political violence.
Based on the definition you agreed to, right?
Yeah. And I think a lot of it too is there's so many things happening. It's actually really hard to get all the facts about everything.
Sure.
And our media is when they make these statements where they start to postulate about an event, and it will become political before we've even fully fleshed everything out. You know, like.
Could you give me an example?
Well, like the shooting that happened at the church yesterday. I haven't seen enough. I don't know. Have you seen any media on it yet? I'm curious to know what the media is saying
quite a bit
about it. And I want to know how are they characterizing it?
Yeah, the media isn't characterizing, even I will say this, even on the left and the right, they're not really characterizing that as political violence.
Okay.
Because it was a guy who really seemed to harbor ill will toward the Mormon church. So it's pretty hard to categorize it as political violence when the targets were largely conservative and the man who carried out the action seems like he might be Republican. But I think we could pick a more clear example, a multitude of them.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like political violence.
I don't think you would argue that this is unnecessary. The assassination in cold blood is an act of terrorism of Charlie Kirk. Is that political violence?
Yeah.
You seem so confident on the Hortman.
What, is that really a hard answer? Like, is that really a hard answer to say yes to? Mr. Popo, there's absolutely no verifiable evidence whatsoever that the shooter was not killing Charlie Kirk because he didn't like what Charlie Kirk had to say politically, you know? It was very clearly a politically motivated assassination. Charlie Kirk was a piece of shit, and someone was like, well, I'm gonna do it. And he did it. And that's that. Some people get more triggered than others, and that motherfucker got real triggered at Charlie Kirk and did what he did. And that individual committed political violence. It's pretty simple. I don't really feel like that's a hard bullet to bite, you know? I.e. personal, not political. That's definitionally political violence. It was personal because it was political. The line from him was, some hate cannot be negotiated. Also, you know how everyone was saying those logs from the shooter must be fake? Those Discord logs must be fake because what teenager says vehicle? Turns out a body cam video of him getting pulled over at a traffic stop came out, and he says vehicle multiple times in that video. Like the guy, Tyler Robinson, in the video refers to his truck as his vehicle multiple times in the body cam video, like a year before, months before at a traffic stop. So verifiably, that is the way he speaks. Like, there's absolutely nothing to suggest that, like, the Discord logs are fake or anything. It was a politically motivated attack. Yeah, it was definitely personal, but it was personal because of the politics. This isn't a hard bullet to bite. Don't, there's no ground you're actually ceding to the right on this, okay? Like, there's no tug of war game in which, like, if you admit, oh yeah, Tyler Robinson was probably just a crazy lefty, like, where you're losing rope in that tug of war game. Whatever rope could be lost has been lost. The only way you can get that rope back is by not coming off as unhinged and full of cope about the situation. And so what I do, I'm not trying to accuse you of being full of cope or anything, what I'm trying to say is, I don't really feel like there's a point in arguing about whether or not he was politically motivated, because it's just clearly an act of political violence. Everybody sees it as such. The way that a lot of lefties try to argue, no, it's not, look at all these different reasons why it's not, no one's really listening. Like, no one cares. The majority of people are like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, he was the biggest conservative political figure out there. I'm just arguing the obvious bullshit Mr. Crowder just said. True. I get you, Mr. Popo. My point, though, is I feel like you could just say, yeah, it was political violence, but that's one guy. That's two guys. One guy killing another guy. Is that indicative of an entire trend? I don't feel like that's a big enough sample size. That should be the immediate response. The argument shouldn't be about whether or not any individual case was political violence. Don't let these people make you have an argument about anecdotes. Make them defend their claims about overwhelming trends with data. Make them get data and back up their claims.
But not Charlie Kirk?
I was just thinking about your question. Yeah, I mean, probably because he was, like, Turning Point USA is a conservative organization, right? That's meant to try and rally young conservatives and be involved. And so, yeah, I would probably agree that his death was political, or his murder, assassination was politically violent. But I guess I just have a hard time reconciling that with, you know, we can say that the senator and her husband being killed wasn't political, but
I'll tell you exactly why.
You know?
I'll tell you exactly why. Because the express motive of the terrorist who assassinated Charlie Kirk was politics. He killed him because he said he's one of those hateful conservative right-wingers. The rhetoric that he espoused...
That is not the quote he said. He did say some hate can't be negotiated, though. Also, the case of those lawmakers who were murdered was absolutely politically motivated. We just went over why. Once again, we're like... This is the hard thing about this. Once they've gotten their opponent to believe a few fundamental lies, now this entire debate is happening on false pretenses. The opponent's already lost. Like, this person that he's debating already lost. He's already won the debate. The second that he managed to get a few lies past his opponent and get his opponent to agree to a debate on the foundation of lies that he got away with, debate already lost. The debate's already been lost. Who's the next person that he brings on? Because I can just already tell you that debate's lost. Crowder won. He got away with it.
Surprisingly productive. And I say surprisingly,
right.
not in the context of change my mind, but in the context of what we see in today's social media highlight reels. I hope that we can keep this up. Let's move on to our next conversation with Madison, like the town.
Allow me to assert the premise today, which is that today, especially in 2025, I am presupposing that predominantly the political violence right now is coming from the left, setting a tenor and tone where everything you see here today is necessary. And if you disagree with that, you're more than welcome to change my mind.
Yeah.
All right, so which part of that the left is predominantly responsible for the tone of political violence today do you disagree with?
Well, I have to think that we first have to consider how many people are on the left and what is the true ideology and mythos behind this new occurrence of violence that we see with the left.
Okay.
Of course, I mean, there's potential skews of media. I don't doubt that crime is not happening, but how many people are truly committing crime out of the sake of leftism or out of the sake of radicalism, or could it be plastered on there just to get this ball rolling?
I really feel... Why are people so afraid to Google things now? Like, I get, like, trust me, I complain a lot about how much Google sucks these days, but, like, it's still kind of usable. Like, it's better to quickly Google and make, like, I don't know about you guys, but, like, I'm pretty confident I'm right on basically every issue. But if I encounter an argument or a point and it's like, huh, I actually don't know if that's true or false, I'll Google that shit. I'll just fact check it. Maybe it'll be true. Maybe I'll have my worldview shaken a bit by an actual true argument made by a conservative. We have ChatGPT now. No one's using it, though. If anybody was using it, they would have brought up the data. The data on political violence between the left and right is such a fast Google search away. Like, it's really not hard to find that and just bring that actual data to the table on this debate. Like, even to do it live, you know? Why does no one say, hold on, wait a minute, I'm actually curious about this. Hey Alexa, what group is considered the more violent politically, the left or the right? According to the data. And just like, ask Alexa or whatever, and it'll pull from Google and just tell you. Like, I feel like you could just do that. Also, I probably made a few people's Alexa just give the answer. Hey, if your Alexa backs me up, then there you go.
About narrative. The only other question that I had a personal question about you is, and it's a tough one.
Well, is it related to the topic?
It is.
Okay.
Would Jesus be on the left or the right?
The left,
well, that's
easily.
a conversation for another day. We talk about that in church quite a bit. I don't necessarily know that he would fit within the current American left-right paradigm. But I will tell you one thing. Jesus would certainly be...
Does he have a fucking toothpick in? Oh my god. You cannot LARP the, I'm a manly man, I got a toothpick in. Also, I paid a bunch of real manly men to be a body shield for me in case someone starts shooting from the rooftops. Come on, you can't... The guys you paid to protect you are the manly men, bro. They're the ones you should be handing out toothpicks to for free. You don't get to have a toothpick, Crowder. You're the one who needs meat shields.
Against political violence as a form of intimidation or coercion. It seems to me like, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're not disagreeing with the idea, the uptick, that there is an increase in political violence from the quote-unquote left. You're just not sure if you define them as left?
Partially, yeah. I just don't necessarily want to just assign political violence or terrorism directly to the left, because we see political violence across the world in forms of autocratic or...
It's absurd that this is like the grounds the argument's even happening on, when the direct response is, actually, the right is more violent. Change my mind. Like, that should be your response to this. Like, the fact that anybody is... Like, we need more people on the left that'll debate conservatives and will not let them get away with a single lie. Because once they've gotten away with one, they've basically already won the debate. Like, you just need to be calling them out on their blatant, confident lying constantly. Fundamentally, the only way you're going to shake a lot of people's faith in these creators and these pundits is to prove their untrustworthiness. demonstrate them blatantly, knowingly lying as much as possible. You can't get everyone this way. You won't convince everybody. But even a few hundred, a few thousand, tens of thousands is a big deal.
Conservative ideologies, so maybe China is a really good example, arguably Russia,
of leftist violence?
Of leftist violence, especially. Or, well, no, autocratic and conservative violence.
China would be conservative?
I would believe so, because they're an autocracy. So they have to practice conservative ideologies to obtain, they can't liberate their people. That's what the left is.
China's state capitalist. In fact, I might be wrong about this now. Granted, when I heard this stat, it was a few years ago. Things can change, but I don't have any reason to believe this has changed. Correct me if I'm wrong. China has consistently had the highest rate of new millionaires and billionaires coming into their wealth for like years now. Obviously, like, America's economic growth pre-Trump is unrivaled, but in regards to China, you can try to claim, oh, they're a communist country or whatever, but there are more new millionaires and billionaire capitalists there being created every day than in any other nation on Earth. And that has been the case, as far as I'm aware, for like half a decade now, maybe longer. There is no communism with Chinese characteristics or Chinese communism. Just because they have I believe they have a state, like, planned economy, or maybe it's like the state. I think the way it more so works is that the state owns large shares in the companies that exist within their country. I think Russia has a similar thing too. That's why a bunch of people boycotted Escape from Tarkov when the war with Ukraine happened, because or started. Because if you pay for Tarkov, then a little bit of your money goes to the Russian government, and that money goes to the war effort. Then, of course, obviously that company would have to pay taxes anyway, so any amount of money to a Russian company would go to their war machine, but still, you guys know what I mean. I think that they basically, like, the government owns, like, a minimum percentage share in, like, every Chinese company. I think that's, like, part of the rules. The Chinese government would be a great study if China would be honest with their numbers. That's true. We don't necessarily know if we can trust China's reporting on that kind of stuff, but I think there's been independent sources that have backed up a lot of those claims.
What liberation is.
Well, I don't know how familiar you are with the CCP, but they're communist. And they did so under the guise of liberating people. And then, of course, you don't actually have any democratically held elections again. So they are communist. They've done.
I can't really say if there's ever really been a communist society. Like, if we're being strictly Marxist about it here, strictly Marxist definition of stateless, classless, moneyless society, has there ever been a truly large communist society? I feel like the only case where communism has ever genuinely existed is on really small scale. Like, at most, maybe a few thousand people. But more often than not, a couple dozen or a few hundred, right? Rojava wasn't communism. Rojava was, I believe, if anything, you could argue that it was a socialist, or not a socialist, a market socialist confederation, I think would be the term. I could be wrong about that, because remember, Rojava is not like a nation or a group of people. Rojava was a group of a bunch of different peoples that were being oppressed and genocided that gathered together under a banner to fight against said oppression, if I'm not mistaken. But I do believe that it was very much like a, holy shit, we have to survive genocide type deal. Fighting ISIS, and now I think for like the last 4 or 5 years it's been Turkey. I could be wrong about that. I haven't brushed up on that area all that much, but I don't think there's ever been any substantially large-scale application of communism. And as much as some people want to say, no, Zan, there has been, at the same time, it's like, do you really want to bite the bullet of saying communism has ever existed? Because any of the examples you could say were communist are usually used as negative examples of communism. Take China or Soviet Russia. I'm not even like I would even say a diehard communist or anything. And I don't feel comfortable saying those examples were communism, because at least from my understanding of the Marxist view of it, definitionally they just can't be. Stateless, classless, moneyless society is a pretty basic definition. It's pretty unambiguous.
And so to liberate people, namely from the decadence, the quote-unquote shackles of the Western world.
Where is the Chinese government liberating people from decadence and the shackles of the Western world, as they call it? Once again, more millionaires and billionaires being created in China every day than any other country.
A little bit, I guess, flummoxed as to how you would define communist China, the Communist Chinese Party, as right-wing.
Well, because when Marx wrote his communist ideologies, it was conservative-based. He didn't enjoy other people, races. He wanted to eliminate races.
What does it have to do with conservatism?
It has to do with human rights, because conservatism isn't looking to liberate people from or define human rights. It's looking to remove human rights, conserving the beliefs of the state and conserving the beliefs of elitism.
Okay, so what if your premise is flawed? So what if conservatism, and I understand, by the way, I agree with you, it means different things across. For example, conservative in the UK. In Canada, you're basically a liberal or a liberal separatist. There's no real conservative party. But in the United States, it's not about conserving the state. As a matter of fact, our Constitution is very unique in that it said the state doesn't grant any rights. So it's preserving the Constitution where you are granted unalienable rights, meaning birthrights, by God. And the state only serves to recognize those rights and protect them. And so if the state ever infringes upon the rights that are naturally yours by birthright...
But who assigned natural rights?
Well, again, the founding fathers would be conservative. But natural rights being...
Republican?
Well, this was before the Republican Party.
Am I correct?
This is the Republican Party.
Yeah.
But I'm just confused. So you would say that communist China, conservative.
I would say it's autocracy that uses conservative.
Okay. But how is that conservative? For example, you say doing away with races.
Absolutely. I actually would agree. Yeah, autocracy is probably the most accurate definition of what China is. Also, there's a lot of really good examples of what China's doing that's pretty similar to what America under conservative leadership does. Notably, the treatment of Uyghur Muslims in China. If you are not being actively rounded up and shipped off to a forced labor camp, that is very much a thing, by the way, then you are constantly under surveillance by the Chinese government. And when I say under surveillance, you might be thinking, they're monitoring your texts or your calls, maybe. Something like that. Maybe they've got a bug in your house, or maybe they put a tracker on your car, like a low jack. Something invasive, but not that crazy. Oh, no. When I say they've got Uyghur Muslims in China under surveillance... There's a moth flying around me. When I say they've got them under surveillance, I mean like 1984 shit, exactly. They set up like several different security cameras outside their front doors. Front and back doors and all their windows, like specifically set up just for them to watch and make sure they don't leave the house without the Chinese government knowing. The claim is that the Uyghurs are at a high risk of committing acts of terrorism. And then, of course, if you are, if they're able to get away with accusing you of this and putting on some sham trial, I'm sure they even have a trial, they send them off to a forced labor camp. I know that during COVID, it was a big thing that they were having the Uyghurs make COVID masks during the pandemic in those camps. So, yeah, I'd say China is pretty conservative.
How is that conservative?
It conserves their power over the state, or over the nation.
Consolidation.
So you believe that
power
conservatives want the state to have more power?
I think that we define conservative beliefs by our Republican values. But conservatism across the globe looks very different.
Okay, well, I agree that...
Right now, conservatism in America, in particular, is heavily centered around defending the president at all costs and handing the president as much power to do whatever he wants without congressional approval or the approval of any of the other checks and balances in office. The go-to catchphrase has been the mandate of the people. The idea that because Trump won, that means that anything he wants to do, the American people want in mass and must be done without any pushback or democratic process. Like, that is absolutely putting more power in the hands of the state. Putting more power in the hands of Trump is putting more power in the hands of the state. I would actually hold Crowder to that. Do you believe that Trump should have less power? Do you believe that Trump should have power taken from him or withheld? The power that he's grabbing for right now. Do you believe he should have less power? Like, get him to give an answer on that, because the fact is, either he has to cede that, okay, yeah, we conservatives do want our side to have all the power in government when we're ruling things. We want everything to be controlled by the state. Or he has to admit, or I guess bite the bullet on saying, he wants Trump to have less power, which would not go well with a lot of his followers. At least I don't think it would.
Different parties, because there's also the Conservative Party, for example, whereas here at the Republican Party. We're talking about conservatism in the United States. It seems to me that your presupposition is that conservatives, Republicans want more state control, want more government power, as opposed to the Democrat Party, liberals, okay, that
Trump literally ordered the National Guard of Texas onto the streets of Chicago in order to enforce the law, quote unquote, against the will of the people of Chicago and its elected leadership. That is definitely a case of modern American conservatives celebrating state power being used to infringe on the American people and the rights of the states. Wait, really? Yes. That is what's happening right now, currently. We'll be covering it a little later in stream.
would apply over healthcare, what you can eat, what you can drive, taxes. They're more liberal, more open-minded on the left with those policies. Okay, I would just disagree with that. And so if you just look at marginal tax rates and you look at gun policy, you look at speech policy, you look at energy policy, what you can drive. But going back to political violence, you said you wouldn't want to ascribe the uptick that we both recognize, political violence to the left.
What uptick? In anecdotal examples getting heavily signal boosted by right-wing media? What uptick? Because the data that Steven Crowder provided does not claim that. I already went into this knowing the data and said as much. The data shows that the right commits several times more political violence than the left. And then Crowder brought his own data to the table. I decided to look into his example and found out that if you read past the part that he wanted to show, it directly contradicts his claim. I can't help that his data that he brought to the table disagrees with him and says that it disagrees with him. It's not even that, the data could be interpreted a certain way. The article he cited says the data comes to that conclusion.
What would be required for it to be ascribed to the left? What if they said it was? What if someone's...
I would say, I'm looking at...
What kind of leading question is that? Okay, so once again, reframing. He is so wrong that the exact opposite of his claim is the God's honest truth. And now he is trying to argue, what will I have to do or say? What has to happen for you to believe this lie? Everything is a slimy little game to get away with a lie about an objective thing that happened, or an objective reality that you can debunk with data. This is such bad faith action. We're really going back to that OG era of conservative slop, bringing back the change my mind slop shit, the lies, the making very strong, confident, untrue claims that are easy to debunk. I'm telling you, I really do feel that at some point, a lot of these figures are going to lose much of their following, just like a lot of them did in 2018 to 2020, as they start to realize, I'm being lied to. Why am I listening to this guy? Sloppy!
This globally.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about here in the United States, because that's what we're discussing. Yeah. What I'm asking you is, what would be required if someone were to commit an act of political violence and you consider it on the left? What if they said it's because they're on the left? Would that count?
I would say so, no.
What does it have to do with what the person says they were doing? There's very clearly cases in which the evidence is there to suggest a political motive. That's literally how we know that Tyler Robinson was politically motivated to kill Charlie Kirk, was because of texts and posts on social media and whatnot. Or sorry, Discord messages. Things that are not necessarily direct statements from the shooter. And yet when it comes to somebody on the right who commits political violence, who has a murder list in their trunk of all progressive figures and progressive activists, all of a sudden it's well, that guy didn't say he was on the right, so it couldn't be political violence.
No.
I think if somebody is doing an act in towards the left, what side of the left and why? Because what we refer to as the left is now a religion and ideology.
I would agree with that.
This is a secular movement.
Secular humanism, yeah.
Well, you can really say demonic too, because a lot of those people are nuts. And to try...
Wait, she's even a conservative. Why is she arguing with him if she's a conservative? Or maybe she's just kind of one of those Zoomers who's bought into the SJW's narrative, right? Keep in mind, a lot of Gen Z, even left, right, man, woman, doesn't matter. A lot of them, culturally, are inundated in right-wing talking points. A lot of right-wing talking points have transcended politics and just become standard Gen Z memes. And so it's not uncommon for even left-leaning somewhat progressive Gen Zers to have quite a few conservative beliefs just because a lot of conservative ideas become memes.
To return back to their liberalist state, because in some ways liberalists believe that they've been robbed of human rights. It's a radicalism of people that, honestly, if the conservatives like maybe 20 years ago started assigning themselves the idea of human rights or like, you know, public policy and things like that, they're probably going to switch around for the conservative movement to be more actually the radical people.
Do you mean like the Civil Rights Act or like Emancipation Proclamation, freedom of speech policy, Section 230, Second Amendment? Do you mean those kinds of rights?
Those kinds of rights. But
if the right had been spearheading those?
And probably a little bit more socialist.
How is the right spearheading the Second Amendment? The Second Amendment is not something that's like up for debate. Okay, this is what's so cringe about the right and the way they talk about guns and 2A and all that. The Second Amendment isn't this like fragile little thing that we have to protect. The Second Amendment is this big, brawlic muscle beast that protects us. The Second Amendment is so powerful that if individual states make a ruling to ban a certain category of firearms, it is very easy for a conservative judge to veto and shut down that law just by appealing to the Second Amendment as a precedent. Like, there is literally no stronger thing you could point to as a legal argument for your claim. This has happened in California before, mind you. The Second Amendment is not this, like, thing that needs to be protected or whatever by the right. It is itself the thing that you refer to when trying to make a claim in any kind of case. Like, the Second Amendment is the silver bullet, pun intended, to like overreaching gun control policy. That's the thing. It's not a thing to protect. It's the answer to those laws. And so that's already a little bit cringe. The way that they talk about how we got to protect the second, all that, right? And then of course there's the fact that the right did not create the Second Amendment. I don't really think you could break down politics in America between left and right when America was founded and our founding papers were drafted. At the time, the breakdown of America's politics was extremely different. Like, the Continental Congress was a very different, like the arguments they were having and the disagreements they were having were very different from the disagreements of today, because these were people that were building a government from the ground up, basically. Their arguments weren't over whether or not, like, gay marriage should be legal or not. It was over whether or not, like, we should have this many branches of government or this many. Whether or not we should have term limits or not. You know, like, it was just not... Yeah, you had, the Loyalists and the Patriots, of course, but that was more of a Revolutionary War thing. When it came to the actual government of the budding United States, most of the political debate and divisions were over how you wanted the country's government to be structured. Which, like, very different types of arguments they were having. And, like, the idea of a well-armed and regulated militia having, and the right to bear arms, everything protected by the Second Amendment, that was pretty bipartisan even back then. Because, like, to be very clear, these were all a group of people who had had their rights to have firearms to protect themselves taken by the British Crown because they considered acts of rebellion a high risk. So they started taking people's guns. They started housing soldiers in people's homes. Like, most of the amendments are written to specifically acknowledge things the British were doing to them, the colonists. And so, I don't know, this is just a nonsense point. Oh yeah, like the Second Amendment, civil rights. This was not a conservative thing. This was a founding father thing.
Ideals, but of course...
Well, it's not just change the definitions, right? What you can't do, or I would disagree with doing, is saying racist means conservative, because it doesn't, right? Most slaveholders would be Democrat, and I know we would talk about how the parties have switched.
Most slaveholders would be Democrat. I'm sorry. What political party is associated with the Confederate flag in America? Like, it's so wild to me that these people will be like, the Democrats are the real racists. They're the ones who fought for slavery and segregation. It's like, Hello, guy with 15 Confederate flags on his truck. What do you think of Donald Trump? Donald Trump? He's God. I call him the Great White Hope. What do you think of insert current Democrat candidate or president? They're literally the devil. That is always the response you will get. There's literally no scenario in which you'll encounter a Confederate flag-waving dude in America who votes Democrat. That is just not how it works. We all know that's not how it works. God. The amount of lies this guy's allowed to get away with is absurd. I mean, that, to be fair, is exactly why he debates on college campuses. Random people who very clearly have no idea what they're getting into when they debate him. Maybe there are some people who debate him and they're making all the same arguments I am. He is in control of what gets shown anyway, so maybe just edits those people out. Hard to say. Anyway, though, if you enjoyed this video, if you found my response to Steven Crowder's idiocy entertaining, educational, or enjoyable in any way, then consider leaving a like and a comment down below. It really helps a lot. Subscribe and ring the bell icon if you haven't already. It does tell you whenever I go live or upload new videos, otherwise it won't. And of course, follow my social medias linked down below in the description, especially my fan Discord, the main hub of my community and fan base. And if you want to support me directly, financially, help me keep the lights on and a roof above my head here at the Xander Hall studio, then consider supporting me directly, financially, by donating, subscribing, or gifting a sub to someone else on my website, xanderhall.com/live, or support me through YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, Stream Elements, Patreon, or buy some custom Xander Hall merch through the Streamlabs link down below. Regardless of how you support me, though, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And as always, I hope you have a good one.